Hey Y&R fans! Welcome to Y&R Trends, your young and the restless updates, shocking spoilers, and all the drama. So grab your coffee, hit that subscribe button, and let's dive right into Genoa City's hottest gossip. Holden had always been a man who kept his cards close to his chest, but when it came to Claire, something inside him shifted. He wasn't the type to run into the spotlight, yet the secret he had been carrying was starting to burn a hole through his conscience. Genoa City had always been a place where secrets never stayed buried, no matter how carefully someone tried to hide them. And now, Claire's pregnancy, once a fragile truth whispered in private moments, was about to become front-page news. Holden could feel the walls closing in, and the pressure of Victor Newman's watchful eye made it clear that silence was no longer an option. People were beginning to speculate, whispers were spreading through crimson lights, and Holden knew it was only a matter of time before someone else took control of the story. If anyone was going to own this truth, it had to be him, and that meant stepping into a storm that could ruin him and Claire forever. When Holden finally stood in front of the press, there was a tension in the air so thick that even the most hardened reporters leaned forward, sensing something explosive was coming. His voice didn't shake. If anything, it rang with conviction, sharp and steady like he had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. "This is my baby," he announced, his eyes piercing through the flashing cameras, his tone carrying not just pride but a defiance that dared anyone to challenge him. For a second, the world seemed to freeze, the sound of pens scratching across notepads drowned out by the collective gasp of everyone present. Genoa City had weathered countless scandals, but this revelation carried a particular weight because of who was involved: Claire Newman, the young woman whose place in the Newman family had already been riddled with doubt, questions, and controversy. Claire herself hadn't wanted this. She wanted time, privacy, and the chance to process the changes happening to her life without the eyes of the world dissecting her every move. When Holden told her he was going to go public, she begged him to reconsider. "We're not ready," she whispered in tears, clutching his hand, her fear and vulnerability laid bare. But Holden, stubborn and convinced that the only way to protect her and the child was through ownership of the narrative, made the call anyway. He believed that by claiming the baby publicly, he could shield Claire from Victor's inevitable attempts to twist the situation into something ugly. Yet, deep down, even Holden knew this choice could blow up in their faces in ways neither of them were prepared for. The Newman family's reaction was immediate and brutal. Victoria, Claire's mother, was blindsided. She had been struggling to rebuild trust with Claire after months of deception and emotional manipulation that nearly tore them apart. To hear from the media that her daughter was pregnant, and that Holden, a man Victoria barely trusted, was standing center stage declaring paternity, cut like a knife. She stormed into Claire's room at Newman Enterprises, slamming the door behind her. "How could you let him do this? How could you let him claim you and that baby in front of the world without even talking to me?" Her voice cracked with both fury and heartbreak, but Claire, shaken and overwhelmed, could barely respond. She hadn't been ready to go public, but Holden had taken that choice from her, leaving her caught in the middle of a family war she was desperate to avoid. Victor, on the other hand, saw the situation as nothing short of betrayal. He had tolerated Claire's presence in the Newman orbit only after relentless convincing from Victoria, but now, with this scandal splashed across every news outlet, Victor was livid. To him, Holden's declaration wasn't just about a baby, it was an attack on the Newman legacy. He called Holden out directly, summoning him to the ranch. "You think you can drag my family name through the mud and get away with it?" Victor's tone was lethal, his glare cutting into Holden like a blade. Holden stood his ground, repeating his words from the press conference: "This is my baby. I'm not hiding it. I'm not ashamed of it. And I won't let you or anyone else treat Claire like she doesn't deserve happiness." For once, Holden wasn't intimidated by Victor's power, and that only infuriated Victor more. Meanwhile, whispers spread quickly among the other residents of Genoa City. At society, patrons gossiped at their tables, wondering if Holden was truly the father or if there was another layer to the story. Nikki was devastated, torn between her loyalty to Victor and her quiet empathy for Claire, who she had seen struggle so much to fit into the Newman fold. "She's just a girl, Victor," Nikki said softly later that evening, trying to calm him down. "She doesn't deserve to be treated like an enemy just because she's carrying a child." But Victor wasn't hearing it. His focus was on control, on the Newman reputation, on ensuring that Holden never had the chance to tear his family apart. The weight of Holden's announcement began to press down on Claire in unexpected ways. While some voices in town offered her quiet support, many others were cruel. Social media lit up with speculation, calling her a manipulator, an opportunist, a fraud who was now using pregnancy as a way to secure her place in the Newman empire. Claire felt trapped in a nightmare she hadn't asked for, her every move analyzed and twisted into something ugly. Holden tried to reassure her, telling her that love would protect them, that he would never let her face the storm alone. But Claire wasn't sure love was enough. She had seen how ruthless Genoa City could be, and she feared that the baby growing inside her was already at the center of a battle it couldn't escape. Even Nick and Sharon weighed in, torn over how to support Claire without adding fuel to the fire. Sharon, always the compassionate one, visited Claire quietly one evening at the Newman Tower. She brought tea, soft words, and a gentle ear. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone," Sharon reminded her. "This is your life, your baby, and no one gets to take that away from you." Claire broke down in her arms, sobbing out the fears she couldn't tell Holden, fears that Victor would somehow take her baby, that Victoria would turn her back, that she would never truly be free from the shadow of her past. Sharon held her, knowing that sometimes, the hardest battles weren't the public ones but the ones fought silently inside a person's heart. At the same time, speculation began swirling about whether Holden had ulterior motives. Adam, never one to miss an opportunity to dig, confronted him at Crimson Lights. "So this is your big play? Tie yourself to a Newman forever? Or is this about power, about money?" Holden bristled, his fists clenched, but he held back from throwing a punch. "This isn't about you, Adam. It's not about the family name, and it's sure as hell not about money. It's about Claire. It's about our child. End of story." Yet Adam smirked knowingly, muttering, "In this town, there's never just one story." His words lingered, planting seeds of doubt even in Holden's own mind about whether love alone could survive the Newman machine. The more Holden defended Claire publicly, the more isolated she began to feel. Each time he shouted, "This is my baby," with conviction, she felt her own voice slipping away. What scared her most wasn't the whispers or Victor's fury, it was the possibility that she was losing her own agency, her own choice in how to navigate this life-altering moment. She started questioning Holden's intentions. Did he do this to protect her, or did he do it because he craved the recognition, the drama, the fight with Victor? Claire's love for Holden was real, but so was her fear that he had thrown her into the fire without asking if she was ready to burn. The revelation of a pregnancy is a moment that exists in a unique space between the intensely private and the inherently public, a personal secret that, by its very nature, anticipates a future of shared joy and communal responsibility. Within the heightened reality of a daytime drama like The Young and the Restless, this duality is magnified to an operatic scale, where a private truth becomes a public weapon, a bargaining chip, a source of scandal, and ultimately, the catalyst for sweeping narrative change. The specific instance of Holden going public with Claire's pregnancy, a secret she had fiercely guarded, is not merely a plot point but a rich textual event that demands a deep analysis of character motivation, the corrosive influence of corporate and familial power structures, the manipulation of public perception, and the fundamental violation of bodily autonomy. This act, presented in the hyperbolic lexicon of soap opera spoilers, serves as a profound exploration of how personal agency is systematically dismantled in a world where image is currency and loyalty is a conditional commodity. To understand the gravity of Holden's decision, one must first deconstruct the character of Claire and the significance of her secret. Claire represents a complex figure, often shaped by a legacy of trauma, manipulation, and a desperate search for identity and belonging within the powerful and often ruthless families of Genoa City. Her pregnancy, therefore, is unlikely to be a simple, joyful event. It is layered with her personal history, her current relationships, and her fears for the future. The decision to keep this information private is a multifaceted one. It could stem from a desire to control the narrative of her own body and life, if only for a brief period, before the inevitable storm of external opinion and interference arrives. It could be born of fear of the reaction of the child's father, fear of the judgment of families like the Newmans or the Abbotts, fear of how this new reality will alter the fragile equilibrium she has managed to build. This secret is her sanctuary, a piece of information that belongs solely to her and perhaps a select few she trusts, a last vestige of autonomy before her condition becomes everyone's business. It is a period of psychological preparation, a quiet before the storm where she can process the seismic shift occurring within her own self without the cacophony of outside voices. The secrecy is not necessarily deceptive, it is protective, a necessary boundary for a woman who has likely had few boundaries respected in her life. Holden, in contrast, operates from an entirely different set of principles. His motivations for exposing Claire's secret are unlikely to be pure or centered on her well-being. In the ecosystem of Genoa City, information is the ultimate leverage, and a pregnancy, particularly one tied to a major family dynasty, is a nuclear-grade piece of intelligence. Holden's actions must be analyzed through the lens of power. Is he a spurned suitor, acting out of jealousy and a desire to inflict pain by shattering Claire's control? Is he a corporate pawn, perhaps aligned with a rival company like Jabot or even a faction within Newman Enterprises, who sees the pregnancy as a vulnerability to be exploited for financial or strategic gain? The pregnancy could be used to destabilize a key figure, to create a scandal that drops stock prices, or to force the executive into a compromising position. Alternatively, Holden could be acting from a misplaced sense of moral righteousness, believing that the truth must be known, that the families involved have a right to know, thereby prioritizing abstract concepts of fairness or bloodline over Claire's personal right to disclose her own medical and personal information on her own terms. This positions him as a moral arbiter, appointing himself the judge of when and how such life-altering news should be delivered, effectively robbing Claire of her voice and her moment. The method of going public is particularly insidious. This does not mean simply telling a family member in confidence, it implies a broadcast, a release of information to the media or through very public channels within the city's social fabric. This act transforms Claire's pregnancy from a personal condition into a public spectacle. It is no longer about her journey into motherhood but about gossip columns, shareholder meetings, and society page headlines. Her body, and the life growing inside it, become topics for public consumption and debate. This is a profound violation, a form of symbolic violence that strips her of dignity and reduces a profound human experience to a plot point in the ongoing saga of Genoa City's elite. The public nature of the reveal maximizes humiliation and minimizes Claire's ability to manage the situation. She is denied the opportunity to have difficult, private conversations with the father, with her family, or with the child's other grandparents. Instead, she is thrust into a defensive position, forced to react to a reality that has been defined for her by someone else's treachery. The control she sought by keeping the secret is not just lost, it is annihilated and replaced with chaos engineered by Holden. The repercussions of this single act ripple outward with devastating force, impacting every relationship in its wake. The immediate partner, the father of the child, is now confronted with this life-changing news not from the mother herself, but through the distorted, sensationalized filter of public gossip. This immediately poisons the well of their relationship, introducing a foundational layer of mistrust, betrayal, and hurt. Any joy or cautious optimism that might have emerged from a private conversation is replaced by anger, confusion, and a sense of betrayal. The dynamic is irrevocably altered. The father may feel robbed of his own right to process the information intimately, and his reaction, however justified it may feel to him, will be perceived by Claire through the lens of the public humiliation she is already enduring. This creates a feedback loop of resentment that can be nearly impossible to overcome. Furthermore, the powerful familial structures of Genoa city, particularly the Newmans, are sent into immediate turmoil. A pregnancy within or connected to such a dynasty is never just a baby, it is an heir, a successor, a new piece on the chessboard of corporate and familial power. Victor Newman, the patriarch, would see such news not as a joyful announcement but as a strategic development to be managed, controlled, and leveraged. The public reveal forces his hand, denying him the ability to control the narrative, a thing he values above almost all else. His reaction will be calculated, cold, and focused on damage control, protecting the company name, assessing the legitimacy of the claim, and determining how to turn the situation to his advantage. For other family members, like Nikki or Victoria, their responses will be filtered through their own complex histories, rivalries, and alliances. Some may see Claire as a victim, while others may see her as a manipulator whose secret has been rightly exposed. The family unit, already a fragile and often fractious entity, is subjected to a new and intense stressor, threatening to shatter existing alliances and create new, bitter divisions. For Claire herself, the psychological impact is catastrophic. The betrayal by someone she likely trusted, or at least coexisted with, is a deep wound. It reinforces any pre-existing feelings of isolation and paranoia, teaching her that trust is a liability and that her private life is never truly her own. The experience of pregnancy, which can be fraught with anxiety and vulnerability even under the best circumstances, becomes a nightmare of exposure and judgment. Every glance, every whispered conversation, is now perceived as a commentary on her situation. Her agency over her own body feels illusory, as decisions about her prenatal care, her living situation, and her future are now subject to public opinion and intense familial pressure. The joyful anticipation of motherhood is overshadowed by a siege mentality, where she must constantly defend herself and her choices. This trauma can define her relationship with her child and shape her identity as a mother from a place of fear and defensiveness rather than love and confidence. The narrative itself, propelled by this explosive spoiler, enters a new phase defined by conflict and reckoning. The storylines that emerge are all consequences of this singular violation of trust. There will be a whodunit aspect, not in the traditional sense, but an investigation into why done it, unpacking Holden's motivations and uncovering who, if anyone, put him up to the task. This leads into corporate espionage plots, as the reveal is traced back to boardroom machinations. There will be intense emotional confrontations between Claire and Holden, where she can articulate the profound depth of his betrayal, giving voice to the show's thematic concerns with autonomy and respect. There will be strained reckonings between Claire and the father of the child, as they struggle to build a foundation for co-parenting amidst the rubble of the reveal. And finally, there will be the long, arduous journey for Claire to reclaim her narrative. This is perhaps the most crucial thematic arc that emerges, her fight to take back control of her story, her pregnancy, and her life. She must transition from being a victim of gossip to the author of her own destiny, making active choices that defy the passive role Holden tried to assign to her. In conclusion, the spoiler announcing that Holden goes public with Claire's pregnancy is a masterclass in soap opera storytelling because it taps into universal and deeply resonant fears about privacy, betrayal, and the struggle for self-determination in a world eager to judge and consume. It is a plot point that functions as a powerful allegory. Holden represents the external forces, be they corporate, familial, or social, that feel entitled to women's personal information and believe they have the right to dictate the terms of its disclosure. Claire represents the individual's fight to maintain sovereignty over their own body and their own story. The act of going public is the ultimate expression of this entitlement, a violent seizure of narrative control. The ensuing drama is not just about the pregnancy itself, but about the fallout from this violation. It is about the corrosion of trust, the weaponization of intimacy, and the immense difficulty of healing once a private truth has been converted into a public commodity. Through the heightened emotions and dramatic conventions of the daytime serial, this storyline holds a mirror to very real anxieties about autonomy in an age of oversharing and constant scrutiny, proving that the most compelling battles are often not for power or wealth, but for the simple, sacred right to have a secret and to share it on one's own terms.